Every year, we see teams burst onto the scene seemingly out of nowhere, and we see some teams that seem to fall off of a cliff. Whether it comes down to age, injuries, or just plain luck, there can be a handful of reasons why this can happen. So today, we're going to dig into the teams in 2023 that might burst onto the scene or completely fall off. This is Smarter Baseball, where we deep dive into everything going on throughout Major League Baseball. Before we get into the video, shameless plug, let's get it over with. Like the video, subscribe to the page, turn on notifications, help us grow and help us be able to give you higher quality content more often. You can also go and follow on socials. Links are down in the description. Before we get to the teams for this video, we need to talk about Woba, weighted on base average, because we're gonna use it a lot in this video. This stat was made to basically address one of the big problems with batting average and on-base percentage, and that's the fact that both of these treat every hit the same. Now, slugging percentage tried to address this, but it didn't do it very well. Slugging percentage awards a batter points for each base that they get on a base hit, but is a home run exactly 4 times more valuable than a single? That's where linear weights comes in. Somebody went through and figured out every time that something happens in a baseball game, say every time that a batter hits a single, how many runs ended up getting scored because of that, and assigned an expected run value to every outcome in a baseball game. So to get our Woba then, we take the value of every time that a batter was unintentionally walked, hit by a pitch, singled, doubled, tripled, or homered, add up all of that value, and then we divide it by the times that the guy went up to bat and wasn't intentionally walked, basically. That number ends up coming out roughly to the same about as an on-base percentage. So if you know what a good on-base percentage is, you know what a good Woba looks like. So Woba is a good measure for how productive a batter was towards creating runs based on the events that they actually had happen in a game. Expected Woba tells us how valuable they should have been based on how well they were hitting the ball using launch angle and exit velo and all of that kind of stuff. By taking the difference between the two of these, we can kind of see how maybe lucky or unlucky a player was based on the difference between these two. All right, that's enough of that. I'm ready to start pissing a bunch of people off and getting called stupid for no reason, so let's get into the picks. The first team that's gonna break out in 2023 is gonna be the Miami Marlins, baby. Marlins hitters were tied for first for the worst differential between Woba and expected Woba, and their pitching staff, that was kind of regarded as being pretty good, was tied for 5th. Their pitching staff was also the 6th youngest in baseball, which is crazy to think about that they're just going to get more age and experience and continue progressing and get even better. And they already had the Cy Young winner last year, but their lineup was the 21st oldest. Where this isn't going to hurt them though is despite the fact that they do have a handful of older veteran players here. I mean, you bring in Gene Segura as a free agent, that dude's going to get playing time. But you have Garrett Cooper, Joey Wendell, Jacob Stallings, Miguel Rojas, John Birdie, all at least 32 or older, that as their 17 top 30 prospects who have debuted over the last 2 seasons start to come in and get settled, you can trade those guys off, get some players back, or just have them around to fill some roles and just be leaders and show these young guys how to step in and take this next step forward that's gonna launch this offense forward while hopefully they start getting a little bit luckier. Now, like we said with their pitching, there at least statistically wasn't really a hole in how they were pitching last year, and they're only gonna get better as they get older. For their offense though, their approach was pretty bad. That should hopefully get better as some of these younger guys get more experience and see more major league pitching. But what's kind of weird is the fact that they were 7th in line drive percentage, where usually if you're hitting line drives, you're going to have a pretty high average, right? That's where most of your hits are going to come from. But their BABIP was 21st in baseball. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. There's got to be some bad luck there, or just some really good fielding against them that let's see if that can happen again next year, especially with the shift going away. Now, while the Marlins jump forward, unfortunately, that means the St. Louis Cardinals are gonna have to take a step back, and I can already feel your hatred. Go ahead, drop those angry comments. Help me out in the algorithm. I dare you. Cardinals hitters were tied for second in the best difference between Woba and expected Woba, while their pitchers were tied for fourth best. This was also one of the older lineups where their hitters were the 20th oldest and their pitchers were the 21st oldest. There's gotta be some regression back towards the mean here this next season. Now, they have had 10 top 30 prospects come up over the last 2 seasons, but you're still gonna have to rely on a good amount of these pretty older players at this point. Yes, you bring in Wilson Contreras. That's definitely gonna help the offense. But Paul Goldschmidt is 35, and you probably can't rely on him to totally repeat his offensive MVP numbers from this season. They're not gonna totally drop off. But more so in the pitching staff, you have Adam Wainwright, who's 41, and Miles Mikolas, who's 34, on top of a couple relievers that are 32. Age catches up eventually. Now, more specifically with the offense, I don't expect a total drop off because it's the Cardinals. They put together good at bats and they somehow make shit work. But last season, they were 9th in fly ball percentage, which is typically your lowest batting average way to get hits, but they were still 18th in BABIP, so right around the middle. How in the hell does that work? And how were they second in the difference between slugging and expected slugging in a pitcher-friendly ballpark? Okay, so now let's just get into their pitchers, which try to follow me on this because this makes absolutely no sense. So their pitchers were not getting guys to swing outside of the zone, but batters still couldn't make contact against them, despite the fact that they were just in the zone all of the time, but guys weren't striking out against them because they were barreling the ball up all the time, but somehow that was productive. How does any of that shit make any sense? It's just the Cardinals, man. They just somehow find a way. So this take is gonna age horribly, and you all get to laugh at me over it. So let's just get to our next team. In the AL, the team that's gonna break out should be the Kansas City Royals. Watch that one go poorly too. Here we go. Kansas City was tied for 5th in the difference between Woba and ex-Woba for their hitters, and their pitchers were tied for 9th. This was one of the younger teams in baseball, as their lineup was 8th youngest and their pitching staff was 2nd. They've brought up 13 top 30 prospects over the last 2 seasons, and they really don't have a whole lot of vet guys that they're gonna have to rely on. I mean, they have Salvador Perez, and you bring in Jordan Lyles and Ryan Yarbrough, who actually could be sneaky little pickups for your rotation there. Outside of that, it's gonna be these young guys just getting more and more playing time. So hopefully they get more accustomed to the major leagues and just start stepping into their own more, let alone some of this luck balancing out. We should see a step forward from the Royals. Now, this is already a team that wasn't striking out a ton, so hopefully as they start getting a little bit more patient, chase a little bit less, we start to see the walks and more solid quality contact goes up. As their power starts to develop even more, that's usually one of the later things that develops for hitters. This team was already making some pretty good, solid quality contact. All of this should take a step forward, and the hitters could end up being kind of sneaky good. Now for the pitching staff, we already talked about you bring in Jordan Lyles, Ryan Yarbrough. They're not going to be world beaters, but they could at least be solid guys, and they bring a bit of a veteran presence. They can start teaching some of these really young pitchers that the Royals have, and dear God, do they need teaching. They were basically like bottom 3 in a good amount of these things that you don't want to be towards the bottom in. So really for this team, there's only up to go. As they get older, they get more experience, and it's hard to be this bad 2 years in a row. And according to this and our numbers, This means that the Royals are going to take the place of the Cleveland Guardians because they're due for probably quite a bit of regression. Their hitters were tied for second in the best difference between Woba and expected Woba, and their pitchers were tied for first when this was the youngest team in baseball. Now, I know I said for a couple of these other teams that being young is actually a benefit for them. That's because these players are still coming up and figuring it out. They really only have up to go from there. The Guardians coming in, being so successful last year as the youngest team in baseball, the rest of the league is gonna make adjustments and they're gonna figure some stuff out. And now it's gonna be on this super young team to basically avoid a collective sophomore slump and remain as good as they were when, we'll get into, they were pretty damn lucky. Now, they've had 13 of their top 30 prospects come up over the last 2 seasons, and they don't have any veteran guys that are 32 or older. They're really gonna be relying on these younger players. You bring in Josh Bell, you bring in Mike Zunino, those guys will fill some roles, kind of help even out this lineup a little bit, honestly. But it's all on these younger guys, and they're gonna have to figure it out as the league adjusts to this kind of weird way that they played this last year. Offensively, this is a team that wasn't striking out, but was not walking either, because they were basically swinging at everything, putting it all into play, hitting very weak ground balls, and that somehow worked for them. Pitching wise, they were right around the middle in strikeouts, but they weren't walking anybody, so they were making guys put the ball in play, which they were doing pretty well. They got hit fairly hard and barreled up a ton, but that didn't end up actually hurting them for some reason. So something doesn't add up there either. So those are our teams that are going to take a step forward and take a step back in each league. Comment down below, who do you think I got right? Who do you think I got wrong? Who should it be instead? Anything else? I know you're going to be pissed about some of these. Go ahead and leave those comments. Thank you for making it this far. If you did, drop a like on the video. You must have probably enjoyed watching some of it. Subscribe to the page, turn on notifications, go follow on social media. Links are down in the description. Help out the channel, help it grow, help us be able to give you higher quality content more often and fill you in more on what's going on throughout Major League Baseball. As always, thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. I hope you have an awesome day. I'll catch you in the next one.